You've got a decision to make, I said, fixing my gaze on her. You can either come clean with your fiancé and admit what happened, or keep acting like this is insignificant. If you choose the latter, we're done. I noticed her jaw clench, a clear sign she didn't want to hear those words, but she needed to. This wasn't something I could just ignore. Let me introduce myself. Jessica. To set the stage, I'm someone who thrives on relationships. I'm married with a little angel at home, but my friends, they're like a second family. Always have been. We're the kind of group that shares memes at 2 a.m., or picks up the phone to vent about a rough day, and when one of us is about to walk down the aisle, you bet we're there for her. Take last weekend, for example. My best friend since forever, Kelly, is getting married soon. She wanted the kind of epic bachelorette party you only see in movies, a last hurrah trip. So, we booked Miami, packed our cutest outfits, and vowed to make it unforgettable. Spoiler, we succeeded. Jess, I'm still recovering, Emily groaned, clutching a mug of coffee so strong it might have been able to strip paint. I chuckled. Please. You were the last one standing at the club Saturday night. Don't act innocent now. She smirked. I wasn't the one dancing on the bar, though. Hey! I pointed my spoon at her. That was Sai, and she earned it. Bride-to-be privileges. Emily shook her head, still amused. Privileges or not, she went all out. Did you see her with that guy? I leaned back, attempting to appear indifferent. You're going to have to be more specific. She snorted. Oh, come on. The guy she vanished with after we left the club? Emily, I said, lowering my voice slightly. Keep it down. I glanced toward Sophie's room at the end of the hallway, where she was likely organizing her stuffed animals into some kind of royal council. Relax, Emily replied, her voice softer but still animated. All I'm saying is she really embraced the last wild weekend idea. Hooking up with a stranger on her bachelorette trip? That's bold. I shrugged, stirring my coffee. It's her life. Mike doesn't need to know every detail, does he? Emily raised an eyebrow. You don't think that's crossing a line? I hesitated. It's complicated. People have their reasons for what they do. Besides, it wasn't serious. It was just a fling, you know? Emily gave me a look, but didn't press further. She knows me well enough to recognize when to drop a topic. Anyway, she said, switching gears, you're not off the hook. The way that bartender was looking at you? Don't tell me you didn't notice. I rolled my eyes, laughing. Please, he couldn't have been older than 22. I'm old enough to be his cool older sister. Sure, she teased, taking a sip of coffee. Whatever helps you sleep at night. That's the thing about these trips. They're not just about partying or fancy cocktails. They're about remembering who you are outside of the daily grind. For one weekend, we weren't moms, wives, or co-workers. We were just us. Later, after Emily left, I scrolled through photos on my phone. One picture showed Kelly standing on the beach at sunset, her arms stretched wide as she laughed, completely untouchable by the world. That snapshot summed up the trip perfectly. Pure, carefree joy. I thought back to Saturday night, when Kelly dragged me onto the dance floor. The music was pounding, lights were flashing, and she was in full party mode. Jess! She yelled over the noise. This is it, my last night as a free woman. You're not in jail, Kelly, I joked, spinning her around. Not yet, she quipped with a wink. Wait until Mike starts giving me a honey-do list. We laughed until we couldn't breathe. It felt so good to let loose, be silly, and forget about everything for a while. But now, sitting alone in my quiet kitchen, a small pang of something crept in. Nostalgia, maybe? Or guilt? I wasn't sure. Moments like those are rare, when you're constantly juggling everything life throws your way. As I set my phone down, I reflected on how life pulls us in so many directions. For Kelly, this trip was a way to celebrate a new chapter. For me, it was a reminder to hold on to who I am, fun, free-spirited Jessica. Because sometimes, in the chaos of being a mom and wife, you lose sight of that part of yourself. Still, I had no regrets about the trip. It was exactly what Kelly needed. And honestly, what I needed too. Life would soon return to normal. Soon enough, though. For now, I was just relieved we had made those memories. I'm Chris, by the way. They say marriage is built on trust, compromise, and understanding, and I've always believed that. I thought Jessica and I were strong. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then this morning changed everything, and now I'm not so sure. Did you see her with that guy? Emily's voice carried clearly. Jessica's laughter followed. Emily, not so loud, she said. That made me stop in my tracks. Leaning back in my chair, I strained to hear the rest. Seriously, Jess, she disappeared with him for hours. Hooking up with some random guy on her bachelorette trip? That's next level. Hooking up! My stomach sank. I waited for Jessica to deny it, to say it wasn't true or that she didn't agree. Instead, I heard her dismiss it. It's her life. Mike doesn't need to know every little detail, does he? What? My heart started to pound. Was she really saying it was okay to cheat? Emily pressed further. You don't think that's crossing a line? Jessica's response came after a pause, her tone calm like she was discussing something trivial. It's complicated. People have their reasons. Besides, it wasn't anything serious. It's just sex, you know. Just sex? I couldn't stay seated any longer. I got up and started pacing the room, my mind racing to make sense of what I'd just heard. Connections I hadn't considered before suddenly clicked. Jessica had gone to Vegas for her bachelorette party 6 months before our wedding. What if... No. I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. Jessica wasn't like that. At least, I didn't think so. About an hour later, I heard the door close and Emily's car drive off. Jessica walked into the living room, smiling like nothing had happened. Hey, babe, how's it going? Her smile wavered. Oh? About what? She sighed, crossing her arms. It's not my place to judge her. People have different boundaries. What works for one couple doesn't necessarily work for another. I blinked at her. You think it's okay to hook up with someone else right before your wedding? Jessica shrugged. It's not like she loves the guy. It was just a moment. She's still committed to Mike. Committed? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jess, she lied to him. How is that commitment? She groaned, clearly irritated. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's not our relationship, it's theirs. Because you're defending it, I said, my voice rising. You're acting like it's normal, like it's okay. Her expression softened, and for a moment I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, Chris, not everyone sees sex the way you do. It doesn't have to mean anything. I stared at her, stunned. You're saying cheating doesn't matter as long as it's meaningless? She hesitated, then gave a slight shrug. I'm saying it's not always black and white. If there's no emotional connection, I don't think it's the end of the world. Something inside me cracked. Do you feel that way too? Would you hook up with a random guy? Jessica met my gaze, and for a moment there was something there. Hesitation. Maybe guilt. Then she said, Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I would, if you were okay with it. But I know you're not. I couldn't believe it. This was the woman I had married. Wow, I said, stepping back. Just wow. Chris, she started, but I held up a hand. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my jacket and heading for the door. My thoughts were a whirlwind, and I didn't know what to feel. All I knew was that something had shifted between us, and I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to how we were. Marriage, sometimes feels like walking a tightrope, balancing your own values, your partner's expectations, and the small misunderstandings that can escalate into big problems if you're not careful. But this time, I wasn't even sure if Jessica and I were on the same rope. He's been distant ever since that talk with Emily, and I get it, he's uncomfortable with what happened in Miami. But it wasn't my bachelorette party. I wasn't the one making questionable choices. I was there for Kelly, helping her celebrate like a good friend. But this morning, Chris couldn't let it go. At breakfast, as Sophie munched happily on her cereal between us, he brought it up again. "About what you said yesterday," he began. I sighed, setting my coffee down. "Chris, are we seriously doing this again?" "Yes," he said firmly, keeping his tone low so Sophie wouldn't hear. "I need to understand. You think what Kelly did was okay?" I groaned. "Not this again. I didn't say it was okay. I said it's not my place to judge. It was her choice, and I'm not about to ruin her wedding over a one-night mistake." Chris crossed his arms. "So you just stay quiet? Let Mike walk into a marriage based on a lie?" "Mike loves her," I shot back. "Kelly's a good person. This doesn't change that." He shook his head, looking more frustrated. "You're missing the point. This isn't about Kelly anymore, Jess. It's about us. What you said. It made me wonder." I froze. "Wonder what?" He hesitated, then pressed on. "Your bachelorette party. The one in Vegas. Was it the same?" There it was. The question I'd been dreading ever since Emily brought up Kelly. I leaned back, trying to stay calm. "Chris, come on, you're seriously comparing the two." "I don't know," he said sharply. "That's why I'm asking." "Fine," I said, throwing up my hands. "You want to know about Vegas? It was fun. We drank, danced, and maybe flirted a little. That's it. Nothing happened, Chris." His eyes narrowed. "Define flirted." I huffed. "You know, harmless stuff. Laughing with strangers, letting a guy buy us drinks. It didn't mean anything," I said firmly, though Chris's jaw visibly tightened. "Didn't mean anything? That's your justification?" he snapped. "It's not an excuse," I shot back, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It's the truth. I didn't cross any boundaries." "But you were fine letting those guys think they had a chance," he retorted. "You don't see the issue with that?" I glared at him, feeling frustration boil over. "Chris, you're blowing this way out of proportion. I wasn't married yet. It was a party. Why is that so hard for you to grasp?" "Because it makes me question everything," he said quietly. That stopped me in my tracks. "Everything?" He nodded, his expression unreadable. "You dismissed what Kelly did, calling it just sex. You think flirting with random guys is no big deal? What am I supposed to think, Jess?" I softened my tone, hoping to reach him. "Chris, I love you. I've always been faithful to you. Vegas was just about enjoying time with my friends. It didn't mean anything more than that." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity before shaking his head. "I want to believe you. I really do. But your attitude about all this, it doesn't sit right with me." Trying to stay patient, I said, "Chris, not everyone shares the same hang-ups about these things. People are different. That doesn't mean I don't respect our marriage." He let out a bitter laugh. "That's not how it works for me, Jess. Commitment isn't just about actions. It's about what you value and believe in." I opened my mouth to respond, but he stood before I could say anything. "I need some time to think," he said, walking into his home office. "Chris!" I called after him, but he didn't look back. The door shut behind him, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Sitting there, I tried to process everything that had just unfolded. I didn't regret Vegas. I didn't regret Miami. But I hated how far apart Chris and I suddenly felt. It's hard to explain, but I've always believed that two people can love each other while seeing things differently. I just hoped he believed that too, because if he didn't, I wasn't sure where we go from here. I couldn't take it anymore. The way Jessica kept defending her friend and minimizing the situation was maddening. It felt like I was talking to a wall. I had to make her understand how serious this was. "You're defending her," I said, barely holding my composure. "If it's really no big deal, why can't you be upfront about it? Why are you dodging the issue?" Her frustration was clear. She was trying to stay calm, but it wasn't working anymore. "I'm not dodging anything," she snapped. I'm just saying it's not my place to blow this out of proportion. She made a mistake, and that's it. I clenched my fists, tension building inside me. No, Jessica, you're making it worse by pretending it's not a problem. You're letting this slide and it's wrong. If you think it's no big deal, why not just tell the truth? Why keep hiding it? She shrugged like it didn't matter. It's not about honesty, it's about loyalty. I'm not going to ruin her life over one stupid mistake. That's when I lost it. No, you're protecting her, I yelled. You're helping her get away with something that could destroy someone else's life. Don't you see that? This isn't about being loyal to your friend, it's about doing the right thing. Her face hardened, her resolve unshaken. Chris, you're making this so much bigger than it is. Why are you pushing this so hard? Taking a deep breath, I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't. Because it matters, Jessica. You're acting like it's nothing, even though she's about to marry someone who doesn't know the truth. And you're letting her go through with it. That's not what friends do. That's not what we do. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. If you're okay with this. If you can look me in the eye and say you're fine with her lying and letting him marry her without knowing the truth, then we've got a serious problem, I said firmly. Because if you're siding with her, I need to know. Jessica looked away, but I wasn't backing down. If you can't hold her accountable for this, then I'm questioning everything I thought we stood for. She said nothing, and I wasn't going to let her off the hook. You have a choice to make, I said, staring into her eyes. You can tell her fiancé the truth, or you can keep pretending it's not a big deal. But if you choose the latter, we're done. I saw her jaw tighten. She didn't want to hear it, but she had to. I couldn't ignore this anymore. Chris, I'm not going to tell him, she said defiantly. It's not my place to destroy her life like that. That was all I needed to hear. Then you've made your choice, I said quietly, grabbing my keys. Don't expect me to stick around if you can't do what's right. I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't need one. The door slammed shut behind me as I left, not looking back. There was nothing left to say. I couldn't stay in a relationship where we weren't aligned on what truly mattered. I wasn't ready for what followed. I probably should have been, but I wasn't. When Chris walked out, I thought we'd work through it. I didn't think he'd actually follow through on his words. But he did. The next day, everything came crashing down. Texts, emails, and phone calls started pouring in. First it was Kelly. She was livid, screaming at me over the phone, accusing me of ruining everything. She couldn't believe I'd let this happen, couldn't believe I'd betrayed her. I was too stunned to even respond. Then came the social media fallout. Her fiancé found out. Chris made sure of that. And, as expected, the wedding was cancelled. Everything fell apart. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Everyone seemed to have something to say. Kelly attacked me publicly, calling me a traitor and accusing me of destroying her life. People I thought were friends unfollowed me, or worse, messaged me to say they were done with me. The entire weekend, the chaos, the whirlwind of events, it all felt so distant now, as though it had happened to someone else entirely. It didn't feel real. I kept telling myself that maybe this was just a terrible dream. But it wasn't. It was real, and I was right in the middle of it. I don't think I truly grasped the extent of the damage until later that evening when Chris called. I knew it was coming. He'd been distant since he left, but hearing him say the words out loud made it all hit home. I'm done, Jessica, he said, his voice steady, calm, and unyielding. You made your choice. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, to explain why I couldn't get involved, but there was nothing left to say. He wasn't listening anymore. Chris, please, I said, my voice breaking. You don't understand. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't think it would go this far. His reply was quiet, but it cut deep. You chose her. You chose to protect her instead of doing what was right, and now everything is falling apart. And just like that, the call ended. The line went silent. I kept holding the phone, hoping he would call back, hoping he'd say something, anything, to make me feel like this wasn't happening. But he didn't. By the time I pulled myself together, the fallout had only just begun. People in my life were taking sides, and most of them weren't on mine. It felt like I was losing everything. The wedding was a disaster now, a complete joke. Kelly wanted nothing to do with me anymore, and I couldn't blame her. I hadn't done anything to stop it. She was left with a broken engagement, and my silence had played a part in that. But the worst part? Chris wasn't the only one distancing himself. My friends, the people I thought would stand by me, started disappearing too. They were disgusted, and I couldn't even defend myself. I had let someone I cared about down, and there was no undoing it. I tried to salvage what little was left. I sent Chris a few texts, pleading with him to hear me out, telling him how sorry I was and that I never wanted to hurt him. But every time I checked my phone, there was no response. Nothing. And then the rumors started. It wasn't just about Kelly and her fiancé anymore. It was about me. People were saying I was just as guilty as she was. Messages started pouring in, some angry, some full of disappointment. From people I barely even knew. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a judgment. I tried to explain, to justify why I hadn't said anything, but what could I say? That I didn't want to ruin her life? That I was afraid of making things worse? In trying to avoid destruction, I had only made things worse. For myself. I was left standing amidst the wreckage, completely alone. I tried calling him one last time, but this time, there were no pleas, no attempts to convince him, just silence. The weight of it all was unbearable. I had no idea where to turn. I had pushed away everyone who cared about me, and I had lost the one person I trusted most. My marriage, my friendships, everything was gone. I stared at my phone, scrolling through the missed calls, the angry texts. Deep down, I knew there was no going back.